Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now. Here's what's happening.
To be clear, I blame Larry Nassar, and I also blame an entire system that enabled and perpetrated his abuse.
Simone Biles breaking into tears, describing Larry Nassar's sexual abuse. She and 3 other U.S. gymnasts testifying about how the FBI mishandled the investigation.
Vaccinations mean fewer infections, hospitalizations, and death. And in turn, it means a stronger economy.
President Biden meeting with top executives from Microsoft, Disney, and Walgreens at the White House today, what they're saying about vaccine mandates. And tax the rich. AOC hit the Met Gala in this head-turning dress. Now she's getting hit with an ethics complaint. We start today with incredibly emotional testimony on Capitol Hill. Gymnastics superstars Simone Biles, Aly Reisman, Michaela Maroney, and Maggie Nichols all talking about their abuse at the hands of former USA Gymnastics Dr. Larry Nassar, testifying that officials didn't do enough to stop it. Take a look.
I don't want another young gymnast, Olympic athlete, or any individual to experience the horror that I and hundreds of others have endured before, during, and continuing to this day in the wake of the Larry Nassar abuse.
This was very clear, cookie-cutter pedophilia and abuse. And this is important because I told the FBI all of this, and they chose to falsify my report and to not only minimize my abuse, but silence me yet again. I thought, given the severity of this situation, that they would act quickly for the sake of protecting other girls. But instead, it took them 14 months to report anything.
I am haunted by the fact that even after I reported my abuse, so many women and girls had to suffer at the hands of Larry Nassar. USA Gymnastics and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee and the FBI have all betrayed me.
My reports of abuse were not only buried by USAG, USOPC, but they were also mishandled by federal law enforcement officers who failed to follow their most basic duties. The FBI and others within both USAG and USOPC knew that Nassar molested children and did nothing to restrict his access.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell in the Russell Rotunda. Leanne, absolutely gut-wrenching testimony from those brave young women today. What else did they say, and how did the Senate Judiciary Committee react?
Hey, Allison, it was a huge deal that these 4 young women sat before the Judiciary Committee and told their stories, something that we haven't seen on Capitol Hill ever before like this, where they came together and said that this is the first time that adults have listened to their story, they say, and taken them seriously, adults in power, I should say, and they thanked the Judiciary Committee for even holding this hearing. Now, there was some extremely emotional testimony, and I want to warn our audience that this next clip from Michaela Maloney is extremely graphic and could be very hard to watch.
The first thing Larry Nassar ever said to me was to change into shorts with no underwear because that would make it easier for him to work on me. And within minutes, he had his fingers in my vagina. The FBI then immediately asked, did he insert his fingers into your rectum? I said, no, he never did. They asked if he used gloves. I said, no, he never did. They asked if this treatment ever helped me. I said, no, it never did. This treatment was 100% abuse and never gave me any relief. I began crying at the memory over the phone, and there was just dead silence. I was so shocked at the agent's silence and disregard for my trauma. After that minute of silence, he asked, is that all?
They not only talked about their experience, but the trauma they are still experiencing. Aly Reisman said that recovering from this hearing could take months because she is still trying to work through the healing process. But the reason they came today, which was extremely difficult for them, was because they want accountability, they want something at the transparency, and they want the system to change, Allison.
Leanne, incredibly brave. Just unbelievable what they did today and how tough it's going to be for them to get past this. Let's talk about something that happened before today's testimony. The FBI fired the agent accused of failing to properly investigate this case. What did FBI Director Christopher Wray say about that and to the Judiciary Committee today?
Yeah, the gymnast testifying was just one part of the hearing. The second part of the hearing was hearing from the FBI's Inspector General, who wrote a scathing report about how the FBI handled this, and from FBI Director Wray, who he came to testify and he came to apologize. And listen to how he said it and why he was here today, and we'll talk on the other side.
We want to take the pain that occurred here and use it as a catalyst to teach people the importance of doing the work in the right way, to teach them what is riding in real heart-wrenching human terms, what's at stake in getting the job done right.
There are still a lot of questions of why it took years for this FBI agent to be fired. These gymnasts said that the FBI completely mistreated them, silenced them, and minimized everything they had to say, and they want something different for the next generation of gymnasts and any young woman who has to go through this, Allison.
Leanne, I think we all do. Larry Nassar sentenced up to 175 years in prison for sexual abuse. More than 150 women came forward. Simone Biles is blaming the system. So what are lawmakers going to do to change that system? What changes are they asking for?
Yeah, the gymnasts were saying there are problems with the system from the top to bottom, including the organization Safe Sport, which was created to protect gymnasts, something that is very closely affiliated with USA Gymnastics, however. And they want changes within the FBI, which is also to protect victims, something that they did not do. Now, some of these lawmakers on the Judiciary Committee, they are calling for criminal prosecution of these FBI agents, or at least one FBI agent who was fired, and that has not happened yet. And it's also important to note that the Department of Justice, including the Attorney General, was invited to testify, and they declined. And the gymnast said that that was felt like a huge slight against them and their stories. Allison.
Leanne, I want to ask you about something completely unrelated. There is some controversy over in the House. We all saw the dress she wore to the Met Gala on Monday, but now Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is dealing with an ethics complaint for going to the gala. What can you tell us? Who filed it and what's the issue here?
It was a conservative watchdog group who filed this complaint. The reason is because a ticket to the gala cost at least $30,000. Representative Ocasio-Cortez did not say if she received that for free or if she paid for that. If she did receive that for free, this conservative group argues that it could be a violation of campaign finance laws, as members of Congress and people running are not allowed to accept gifts unless there are some specific exceptions. And so they are asking for an investigation. We've reached out to Representative Ocasio-Cortez's office to get their response to the filing of this complaint, but we haven't received anything yet. Allison.
All right, we know you let us know when you do. Leanne Caldwell, thank you so much.
Yeah.
President Biden hosting a roundtable of business leaders and CEOs at the White House this afternoon. On the agenda, COVID-19 and vaccine mandates. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joining me now. Monica, Microsoft, Disney, Walgreens, just some of the big names in this meeting. Who else was at the White House, and what did the president have to say to them?
The president really wanted to make this message to CEOs. Thank you for what you're doing at your companies in terms of requiring vaccinations, and please continue to make them more public, because they would like other businesses like the ones you mentioned to model that kind of behavior. And it's really because of this challenge that the administration sees right now. They only have so much power in terms of what they can require, obviously, across the federal government, federal workers, contractors, healthcare workers. Many of these people now need to get the shots, or they could risk losing their jobs. But this is about the new emergency rule under the Department of Labor that is asking private companies, anybody with more than 100 employees, to really ask their employees to either get vaccinated or submit to rigorous testing. And here's why the president said he feels he wants even more businesses in the private sector to do this.
In total, these vaccination requirements will cover 100 million workers, 2/3 of all workers, and it builds on previous requirements that we've installed so far. And the vaccine requirements work, and more companies are instituting them. Even at Fox News, they require it. And I'm not being facetious when I say that, but it's interesting that they've stepped forward and done that as well. And the group I'm meeting with here today is leading the way.
The White House says that they have seen these private companies essentially see a boost in vaccinations once they did implement the mandate. So they wanted to share why they view that as effective. And again, could be a role model for other companies. But as you know, Allison, already many Republican critics, even other companies have said, wait, not so fast. There's going to be legal action. We aren't sure we want to comply with this. So the White House is also bracing for that kind of a battle. And in terms of the timeline of all of this, the Department of Labor rule is even going to take a matter of weeks to write and put into effect. So it's going to be later in the fall that we really see the benefit from this, the president said. But that's why he wants companies who can take matters into their own hands sooner to consider doing so.
Monica, President Biden also met with Senators Joe Manchin and Sinema separately today to talk infrastructure. They both have issues with the cost of that $3.5 trillion human infrastructure bill. How did those meetings go?
And we've seen them come to the White House pretty frequently over the last 7 or 8 months, usually for these one-on-one meetings. We know, for instance, Senator Joe Manchin speaks with President Biden behind the scenes all the time, and the White House doesn't necessarily do a readout of those discussions. It is more notable, though, when he comes for an in-person sit-down discussion in the Oval Office. But again, the White House is remaining very tight-lipped on exactly what was discussed. We know for sure what the subject matter was, and we know from Joe Manchin's own public pronouncements where he stands, where his hesitations are in terms of the size and scope of the budget reconciliation bill, that $3.5 trillion price tag. But we haven't heard yet from Senator Sinema, whose meeting did take place earlier today. She was back on Capitol Hill, but also didn't want to reveal too many details. So we're waiting to see where they can maybe find some negotiation. And the meeting with Senator Manchin is actually still later this evening. So we'll probably get the first readout on how that went from him once he's back on Capitol Hill. But the White House, throughout this entire process, it's a very delicate dance with these Capitol Hill negotiations. They don't want them derailed. They really want to be able to find common ground.
Monica, President Biden's also planning to talk about a national security initiative at the White House. What do you expect him to touch on there?
All we know is that this is going to be in coordination with the countries of Australia and the United Kingdom. So virtually, the leaders of those two will appear alongside President Biden to talk about what seems to be a new initiative, at least between the three countries. There are reports out there that it has to do more with nuclear defenses, perhaps cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, things in that realm. But the White House has not wanted to get in front of it. They want to let the president speak about this, a clear priority. And of course, this is a point in time, Allison, where the president is going to be entering in a lot of international diplomacy. He will head to the United Nations and address the General Assembly next week in New York City. And he's also going to be hosting a lot of leaders here in the next couple of weeks to discuss all of the many pressing issues on the world stage.
All right, Monica Albert, the White House, thank you.
We said yes to diversity. We said yes to inclusion. We said yes to pluralism. We said yes to all those things that we hold dear as Californians, and I would argue as Americans.
California Governor Gavin Newsom isn't going anywhere. The governor cruising to victory in the recall election, keeping his job by a double-digit margin. NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson's in Sacramento.
Yeah, Allison, the long recall is over, and the projections have even smashed the predictions heading into Tuesday. Newsom will hold on to his seat. Voters voicing their opinions at the ballot box by choosing to keep the governor. Meanwhile, there's still multiple issues, crises facing this state. You have the homeless crisis. About a half of the unsheltered population in this country are right here in California. You've got, obviously the wildfires that are burning. More than 2 million acres burned so far this year. The drought that is doing irreversible damage to the environment. COVID, obviously, with the amount of shutdowns that we've had in this state. Housing, with a medium home price in California, now more than $800,000. All of these issues were part of the referendum on the governor. And in what we've seen in the exit polling, with people coming out and saying, here's why I voted no, it appears that, most of the voters in this state align with Governor Newsom. Now, that's not a huge surprise. I mean, Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1 in this state. So the messaging from the Newsom campaign was, hold on, I've allocated billions of dollars to each one of these issues. Wait for my term to end for some of this to bear fruit. And it appears that voters have done that in his acceptance speech, in his victory speech. Very gracious, sort of very grateful to voters that, in the middle of a pandemic in September, in this strange election with parents trying to get their kids back to school, that voters actually turned up and turned out at the polls. And with the mail-in ballots, that was a huge thing this year, too. Every member of the electorate, 22 million people or so, got a mail-in ballot, and they used those ballots again, mostly to cast their votes for Gavin Newsom. Moving forward, the governor said very plainly that now the work can congeal around what needs to happen in the face of all these topics and issues and, again, crises. As far as Larry Elder, the top challenger on the other side, leading those other 45 candidates, emerging as one of the front runners, it's not known what his political future will be. He sort of left it open-ended. One thing he did do that I think a lot of people didn't consider was that sort of graciously accept the results of the election. Everybody, I think, thought he would stick to the line as he was going in, that there may be some sort of fraud going on or something like that. But in his concession speech, he was very much on the line that we lost, we need to accept this graciously and move on. Still unknown to what his future may be. He may be leading sort of this rebellion on the GOP side. He may go back to media, radio, TV. I'm sure there's a bright future with how exponentially his profile has grown. But again, the voters here have spoken. Gavin Newsom will stay governor at least until the next election.
Let's go to NBC News Digital reporter Maya Eaglin. She's got the latest headlines from NBCnews.com. Hi, Maya.
Hey, Allison. We start with an update in the case of a missing 22-year-old woman from New York. Police in Florida confirmed Gabrielle Petito's fiance, Brian Laundrie, is now a person of interest in her disappearance. The couple was on a cross-country trip when Gabby's parents say she suddenly stopped communicating with them in late August. Authorities say Brian has, quote, not made himself available to be interviewed by investigators and has not provided any helpful details. In a statement released by their lawyer, the Laundrie family writes they hope, quote, the search for Miss Petito is successful and she's returned to her family. Authorities in Louisiana say they've captured a 504-pound alligator suspected of killing a 71-year-old man. In late August, Timothy Satterley Sr. was walking in Hurricane Ida's floodwaters when his wife says she saw the gator attack him outside their home. By the time she returned with help, her husband had disappeared. Investigators confirmed they found human remains in the 12-foot gator's stomach, but are still working to verify if they belong to Satterley. More than 1,400 dolphins are dead following a centuries-old hunting practice off the coast of the Faroe Islands Sunday. It's the largest slaughter of dolphins to ever be recorded on a single day. And while the hunt is not done for commercial purposes and is authorized by the government, the practice has prompted outrage from local residents and environmentalists. 9 Hong Kong pro-democracy activists sentenced to up to 10 months in prison for taking part in an unauthorized Tiananmen Square vigil last year. The last 2 vigils were banned by police, citing COVID restrictions. However, many activists viewed the bans as an attempt to silence defiance toward Beijing. 3 other activists received suspended sentences. All 12 pleaded guilty. The U.S. Soccer Federation offers the same contract proposals for its men's and women's teams, a major step in the fight for equal pay. The organization also says it will refuse a deal in which World Cup prize money is not the same for men and women. The announcement comes years after dozens of U.S. women's national soccer team members filed a lawsuit arguing female players were consistently paid less than their male counterparts, despite superior performance on the field. Allison, back to you.
All right, Maya, thank you. Nicholas, now a tropical depression, dropping incredible amounts of rain on parts of Louisiana. NBC News reporter Vaughn Hilliard's in Laplace, where worn-out homeowners are prepping for more flooding.
Allison, you can see that radar here, and there's still concern about flash floods taking place in cities all the way from here over to the panhandle of Florida as the storm makes its way northeast of where we are right now. But the concern here today was particularly in place like La Place, Louisiana, where we stood just 1 week ago when Hurricane Ida left thousands of folks here without power. And when you go and look at the homes and just go down the streets here, you watch that rainfall here today from the storm Nicholas just come down on so many thousands of homes that no longer have roofs, but others that have also endured flooding here. I want to let you listen to part of my conversation with one of the residents here, Nancy Warren. I always saw you as the rain was coming down. I drove by earlier.
Yes, sir.
You and the cats, and I saw this. This is
just part of it. Yes, sir. We still have a lot of furniture to pull out of the house and more gutting. They've got to do more gutting in the house of the bathrooms and the kitchen. It's just, you just gotta get rid of everything.
Again, watching these storms roll up and these clouds come and drop rain every few hours here is difficult. But also, as Nancy said, it's almost doesn't even faze folks here anymore because everything in terms of their belongings, so much of what they had was already destroyed. Now it's so much just a cleanup process and figuring out where to go from here.
Let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Michelle Grossman. Michelle, we've been seeing a lot of you lately, and we love it. But, man, for those poor folks in Louisiana, Nicholas has taken his sweet time there. What's going on with this system? Is it stalling? What's it doing here?
You said that perfectly. Hi there, Allison. Yeah, it has nowhere to go. It doesn't have a steering pattern. So when you have a storm, you want to push it out, but really there's no mechanism to do that. So it's at almost a standstill, walking pace. We could walk faster than how it's moving. So we're seeing that rain falling in the same spots over and over again. And we're talking about tropical rain bands. So that's the problem. The good news is we're looking better than yesterday in Louisiana, and tomorrow will look even better. So let's talk about where it is right now, where the concern is. But as we look at Doppler estimates, we saw 13.96. That's the official number out of Galveston, 7.05 in Beaumont, Lafayette, 3.78. And we still do have a flash flooding threat. The flash flood threat that is in the green, so that includes parts of Louisiana, into Mississippi, Alabama, even the panhandle of Florida. And we're looking at flash flood warnings as well, where you see that maroon color. And that means flash flood is occurring or it's imminent, meaning it will occur. So that flash flood watch does include 6 million. Again, flooding is responsible for the most deaths when it comes to weather events. So please be weather aware. Watch your local news if you need to at times, and please stay ahead of this rain. So we are tracking Nicholas still, again, at a standstill. This is what radar looks like right now. So you see plenty of yellows and reds and oranges. Those are the darker rain bands, or the heavier rain bands, because this is coming off the Gulf. The Gulf is really just feeding this moisture. As we mentioned, this isn't moving very fast. So we're seeing that heavy rain. When I widen out, we're seeing it as far as Georgia, even into parts of Tennessee, South Carolina. And this will be the story over the next several days into the weekend, where we're going to see these flooding rains really kind of going over those same areas. So here's the latest information from the National Hurricane Center. Winds at 30 miles per hour. And the movement, that's what we're really focusing on. It's moving at 5 miles per hour, and that's painfully slow, and it will be painfully slow over the next several days because it has nothing to push its way out. So additional rainfall, we're looking at anywhere up to 10 inches in some spots. And keep in mind, Allison, this is on top of very saturated grounds. We've had so much rain here. So it's falling on grounds that are already saturated. The rain has nowhere to go, and that's really where the problem is. And then we are watching 2 additional systems over the next several days. So we'll certainly keep you posted. But yeah, we are thick in the hurricane season, and unfortunately, we're really active at the moment.
I know it's keeping you very busy, Michelle. Thanks for making the time to be with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was an attempt on his part to do something to protect his child.
Just when you thought this case could not get any weirder, police now say South Carolina attorney Alex Murdaugh tried to plan his own murder for an insurance payout. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck has all the twisted details.
Well, Allison, from the start, the details of Saturday's shooting were raising suspicions. This happened in broad daylight on a desolate road while Alex Murdaugh says he was changing a flat tire. Now we're finding out what really happened. Could be even more unbelievable.
South Carolina law enforcement announcing an arrest in the bizarre shooting that left prominent attorney Alex Murdaugh hospitalized. Part of a plot, police say Murdaugh admitted to organizing himself. Law enforcement arresting 61-year-old Curtis Edward Smith, charging him with assisted suicide and insurance fraud. Police documents revealing Aly Murdaugh instructed Smith to shoot him in the head, even giving him the firearm to do it. All so Murdaugh's son could collect death benefits on a $10 million life insurance claim. On Tuesday, police say Smith admitted to being present during the shooting and disposing of the gun, adding more charges are expected. Police documents describe Murdaugh as a co-defendant. In an exclusive statement obtained by NBC News, Murdaugh's lawyers blame the shooting incident on people feeding his addiction to opioids, adding, these individuals took advantage of his addiction and his ability to pay substantial funds for illegal drugs. One of those individuals took advantage of his mental illness and agreed to take Alex's life by shooting him in the head. The shooting occurred one day after Murdaugh resigned from his law firm amid accusations of financial misconduct, which authorities are now looking into. 3 months ago, Murdaugh told police he found his wife and son fatally shot on their family property. There have been no arrests related to their deaths. Murdaugh's lawyers say their client is fully cooperating with SLED in their investigation into his shooting, opioid use, and the search to find the person or people responsible for the murder of his wife and son.
Well, court records indicate that Aly Murdaugh actually represented Curtis Smith as his lawyer in a 2013 traffic-related case. We are told Murdaugh is still recovering in rehab.
It is time for the bottom line, our daily look at what's going on in the business world and beyond. National Hispanic Heritage Month starts today, and there are signs that Latin-owned businesses are bouncing back from the pandemic stronger than ever. NBC News Now anchor Morgan Radford talked with 2 female entrepreneurs leading the way.
Allison, it's crazy to think that the Latino business boom was really the business story of 2019. But then just a year later, when COVID hit, those numbers were almost the reverse. Hispanic Americans 4 times as likely to be hospitalized as their white counterparts, and nearly a third of Latino small businesses taking a pretty big hit. But now many in the community are feeling a new sense of hope.
After a crushing pandemic that cost the Latino community 32% of its businesses, there's new evidence that now Latino-run companies are not just surviving, but thriving. And Sandra Velasquez's pandemic-born brand Nopalera is one of them.
I just felt like I didn't have a choice but to figure something out, to do something and do it big.
So Sandra created a line of soaps and botanicals based on the nopal, the Spanish word for a type of Mexican cactus.
So is there actual cactus in this?
Yes, all of these have actual cactus.
Using a symbol of her culture as a selling point.
What is distinct about your company?
I overtly put our culture into the brand. It's loud and proud on the packaging. The name is in Spanish. There's a brown woman on the front with nopales coming out of her head. So I really did that on purpose so that when you saw the brand, you're like, oh, it looks like my mom. And I love that. And people really see themselves reflected on shelves.
And why is that? Why was it so important for you to make sure that Latino identity was really central to your product?
Well, to be honest with you, I feel like in this country, it's so Eurocentric. When you see all these products with French names and Italian names and they're expensive, people just accept that. And I really wanted to fight this kind of stereotype that Latino products should be cheaper or should be in the bargain bin. I just feel like we have such a beautiful, rich culture and we are totally worthy of the same price tags and our community wants to purchase them.
And she built all of this.
So now we're up to about 200 independent boutiques nationwide.
This product is in 200 stores across the country.
Yes, yes.
Starting from her home kitchen in Brooklyn.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. In the middle of the pandemic, when the country is facing record unemployment, you are working not 1, but 2 full-time jobs and being a single mother and starting your own company.
Yes, and I think it's because I just felt like I had no choice but to create something for myself.
Her story was once a common one. In the 10 years before the pandemic, Hispanic entrepreneurs grew by 34%, faster than any other demographic. Then the COVID crash came, and Hispanic families made up nearly a quarter of initial job losses.
Here, let me help you.
A loss that hit home for Kayla Castaneda. After losing her job as a consultant at the start of the pandemic, she turned to her roots.
We joke around and we say, when life gives you lemons, make aguas frescas.
And co-founded Agua Bonita, a twist on traditional flavored water known as aguas frescas, and the work of her grandparents picking fruit in the California sun.
This was a really important part of starting this business, was wanting to put our culture at the front and center in a modern way, in the same way that we are modern Hispanics, modern Latinas, you know, because that takes on a lot of different shapes for a lot of people. Sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes it's just your grandpa's agua fresca recipe.
A recipe for success both she and Velasquez hope will continue for their entire community.
Is that in any way symbolic, given that you started this company in the middle of a global pandemic?
100%. Like, our byline is like resiliencia es belleza, like resilience is beauty. And I just feel like that is just, we've always been here, we're always going to be here, and we're always going to continue to grow no matter where you try to put us or throw us.
And be resilient in the process.
Yes.
Resilience no matter the odds.
There are really some striking numbers to back up these stories. In fact, the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce did a survey that found 87% of Hispanic small business owners say they're optimistic about the future. And speaking of optimism, Sandra's company, Nopalera, just announced that her products will be sold in select Nordstrom stores starting today. And Kayla's Agua Bonita has already had more than 100,000 cans come off the production line and sold out their stock 3 times.
The Department of Justice going after an emergency order to try to block Texas from enforcing its new anti-abortion law, the most restrictive in the country. SB 8 took effect 2 weeks ago, banning all abortions past 6 weeks in the state of Texas. NBC News correspondent Julia Ainsley is here now. Julia, the DOJ's filing calls this Texas law an unprecedented scheme, claiming it's unconstitutional because it doesn't allow women and providers to challenge the statute in federal court. What else is the DOJ saying here?
Well, they're saying that what they need right now is an emergency stay, that while they understand that this process may need to play its way through the courts, what they need now is relief for women who need to get these procedures in Texas. And they want a district judge to weigh in and say that while they wait for the full merits of the case to be talked about and make its way through the courts, that for now, this law should be put on hold because it's too damaging for women and that it's so incredibly draconian, because it effectively bans abortion at 6 weeks, and that it also allows anyone, people with no connection whatsoever to a woman getting an abortion, to sue people who might have a connection to that procedure, including, you know, like an Uber driver who would take her to a clinic.
So, Julia, let's talk about how this filing is different from the lawsuit the DOJ filed last week suing the state of Texas over the same law.
So it's the same lawsuit. They are now just asking for an emergency stay. They filed their official lawsuits, a civil action against the state of Texas last week. They didn't hear back. Now they're asking for an emergency relief. What could happen is that this judge will deny it. Then they'll appeal to the Fifth Circuit. That's, of course, one of the most conservative circuits in the country. They could deny that, and then it could make its way up to the Supreme Court. But before people say, well, the Supreme Court already let this go forward before, what the Supreme Court let go forward was they did not stop this law from going forward after an appeal from abortion rights providers in Texas. This is now a different suit in that it's coming from the federal government. And in their declination from the Supreme Court, again, it was a very narrow decision. They said they might consider this again. They're not weighing in on the constitutionality of the law. It may very well be unconstitutional, but they just thought that there were more procedural questions that needed to be answered. So it could be that the Justice Department finally does answer those. But for now, what they want is something in the near term.
Got it. So let's just say the DOJ does get an emergency order here. If it does get a temporary restraining order or a preliminary injunction, then what would happen?
Well, it would mean that these providers could start operating again as soon as that injunction goes into place. But it doesn't mean that the rule is, or that the law SB 8 is permanently off the books. It could be that they put in the preliminary injunction, then they have oral arguments, then they decide this can go forward. I mean, there could be a lot of flip-flopping on whether or not this law can go forward or not, until the thing that would actually kind of put the nail in the coffin here is for a federal judge, either at the district, appellate, or Supreme Court level, for them to finally weigh in and say, you know what, this law is unconstitutional, or it is constitutional. And that probably might not happen until someone actually uses this law to then sue someone who's provided an abortion. So it could be a long time before we actually see whether or not this law will stand.
All right, Julia, we have all been watching this case so closely to see what happens here. We'll see if the DOJ is effective in getting its emergency order. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. In 1970, Norma McCorvey was a Dallas waitress looking to end her pregnancy, but she couldn't because of a restrictive Texas law. McCorvey sued Dallas County District Attorney Henry Wade and became known as Jane Roe, the plaintiff in the landmark Supreme Court decision Roe v. Wade. But by the time the court finally handed down its ruling in 1973, McCorvey had a baby girl and gave her up for adoption. So whatever happened to baby Roe? Here to answer that, Joshua Prager, author of The Family Roe, an American story, all about McCorvey and the child whose conception sparked the landmark Supreme Court decision. Joshua, this is all so fascinating. I have so many questions, but let's get right to the biggest one. What happened to baby Roe after she was adopted, and why did she finally decide to tell her story?
Well, she was adopted and was living a life like most other young people, just sort of, as she put it in high school, wanting to date boys and go shopping. And then all of a sudden, when she was 18 years old, a tabloid approached her and told her that she had been born to Jane Roe and that they were going to go ahead with their story, whether she liked it or not. They withheld her name, so people did not know her name until now. But all the years since then, and so that's 32 years, she has been burdened by this secret, having to sort of keep this quiet, worrying, as she said, that people she met did not fully know who she was, and not liking the fact that this had been thrust upon her. And so when I approached her and told her that I had also reached out to her two half-sisters, meaning the other two children Norma McCorvey had given birth to, she decided that she wished to participate in my book.
In your piece for The Atlantic, you wrote, from Shelley's perspective, it was clear that if she, the Roe baby, could be said to represent anything, it was not the sanctity of life, but the difficulty of being born unwanted. For so many years, Thornton held on to her secret that she was the Roe baby. Could you talk a little more about how that affected her?
Yeah, you know, people used her as a symbol. She was not known, but they said whoever the Roe baby is, he or she, they sort of are the living case, the incarnate case against abortion, because they would say, had abortion been legal, this human being would not be alive. That is something that Shelley, all these years, has sort of chafed against. That's a very difficult thing. And she wanted it known that she, as she puts it, is not simply the result of, she doesn't want to be a symbol. She doesn't want to be connected to Roe or to Norma. Rather, she says now that she can sort of step forward and, you know, step away from this and take ownership of who she really is.
She's now a mother of three, living in Arizona, and she nearly met McCorvey in person in 1994, but that meeting didn't happen. How come?
Yeah, you know, they spoke on the phone and Norma said some horrible things. She said to her, she told her that she had to thank her. And Shelley said, why? And she said, because I didn't abort you. And first of all, Norma had wished to do so. But second of all, that is a horrible thing to say. And Shelley then, as she said, I called it quits. I knew I was not going to be able to have a relationship with this woman. And yet, years later, she found it within herself to sort of feel for Norma and say that she wanted Norma to know that there was a person she had brought into this world and to feel the good that that can bring to her, Shelley told me. And yet in the end, it was too much to reach out and see her before she died in 2017.
McCorvey was a controversial figure. Aside from the things you just told us, years after her case, she advocated against abortion. You say that Norma's personal life was complex. She had casual affairs with men, one brief marriage at age 16. She bore 3 children, each of them placed for adoption. But she slept far more often with women and worked in lesbian bars. McCorvey died at 69 in 2017. What else did you learn about her, especially in her later years?
Well, it got to the point that it was too much for her to carry, being Jane Roe, whether she was representing the pro-choice or the pro-life. And late in years, she actually stepped away from this. And she wanted it known that she had not had an abortion. This was incredibly important to her. She wanted people to know that she had had 3 children. That said, she had never sort of wanted to be a mother. She was, in many ways, unfit to be a mother. She had a chance to mother her first child, but she wasn't able to. And that child ended up being raised by her own mother, meaning the child's grandmother. The other 2 children were given up for adoption. And only through my book did Norma find out who her second child was and actually meet that woman. But she was never able to come together with her third.
Joshua, the details here, the story here, so many things that those of us who just have a surface knowledge of Roe v. Wade had no idea about. It was really incredible to learn so much more. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It is the dawn of a new era in space travel. An all-civilian crew set to blast off for the first time ever. The 4 private passengers going on a 3-day tour aboard a SpaceX rocket taking off from Florida. NBC News correspondent Kerry Sanders is near the launch pad with a preview.
Allison, it is all systems go, as is the case with any launch. They're watching the weather very closely. You can see the Falcon rocket behind me. On top of it, there is the capsule, and in that Dragon capsule is where the 4 civilian astronauts will be. I had a chance to talk to them, and each of them tells me they are ready for 3, 2, 1, liftoff.
We're writing the narrative of human spaceflight right now.
This morning, we're waiting for the final countdown. None more exciting than 4 ordinary Americans. Jared Isaacman, Siam Proctor, Haley Arsenault, and Chris Simbrowski, who are about to take an extraordinary trip to space. Why go there?
I mean, this is in human nature. I mean, it's like, why cross the oceans? Why climb the mountains, right? Curiosity is part of us.
No one has ever gone to space without NASA or Russian training until now. SpaceX put the crew through more than 6 months of intensive physical and mental preps.
It's like a couple of your largest buddies sitting on your chest, pushing you into your seat.
Netflix followed them each step of the way for the documentary Countdown Inspiration 4 Mission to Space. While in space, they'll collect scientific data, how space impacts the average person's heart activity, sleep, and blood, as well as changes in behavior and cognitive performance. Haley, the flight's 29-year-old chief medical officer, was once a patient. She was 10 years old when cancer was discovered in her leg.
I'll be the youngest American to go to space, the first person with a prosthetic body part, and the first pediatric cancer survivor.
She was treated at St. Jude as a child, where she now works as a physician's assistant. After Haley was selected for the mission, she talked to Savannah and Hoda.
Give us the moment when you got the call, and of all the people on the planet Earth, you were one of the ones selected.
Basically, they just asked if I wanted to go to space. And immediately I said, yes.
When Cyan was in her 30s, she applied to the NASA astronaut program twice. At 51, she will now be the first ever black female pilot of a spacecraft.
Black females, girls, people of color, and they see me. That's very special.
When they lift off, it'll take about 12 minutes before they hit final separation from the rocket and the booster, and then the capsule will head out to a point 357 miles from Earth. That's beyond the Hubble telescope, and interestingly, it is the furthest from Earth since man went to the moon. So this is going to be an incredible 3, possibly 4-day mission, and while they are up there, they'll be orbiting the Earth about 15 times a day.
Broadway is really back. After 18 months, 3 of the Great White Way's biggest shows, Hamilton, Wicked, and The Lion King, joining forces to draw the curtains last night. Today Show co-anchor Hoda Kotb was there for the grand reopening.
we are here at the Lion King.
The house is open!
Welcome, Hamilton!
Broadway is back! Broadway's back!
You excited?
I am so excited. Pumped. Because you know why?
Why?
Because Broadway's back!
Yes, baby! It has been 552 days since the Great White Way has been all lit up, and audiences, they were amped. Oh my gosh! We're going to Broadway! Everybody go see a show!
Are you excited?
I'm excited!
You're so excited!
I'm so excited!
Defying gravity.
Over at Wicked, ticket holders were ready to defy gravity.
No wizard that there is or was is ever gonna bring me down.
And at Hamilton, the cast surprised the standby ticket lottery line with a special performance with the show's creator, Lin-Manuel Miranda.
It's up to you. Have you seen the show before?
No, I'm going to see it today.
Oh,
Some had been waiting years to win tickets.
This is big. This is historic. Huge. Yes.
Welcome back to Broadway. Although on this night, it felt like everyone had won the lottery.
Hello? Glinda? Elphaba?
Before we opened the doors, we all had a chance to speak to the stars of the shows. Gina Claire Mason and Lindsay Pierce play Glinda and Elphaba, the witches of Wicked. You guys have waited 18 months.
I'm not going to cry right now.
For this moment,
Sorry.
for the moment that's happening right now. Is it sinking in?
I think we're both feeling a lot of gratitude. So you're going to make me cry. I know. I'm like, so it's not good for the voice. It's not good for the voice. Don't do it. I know. Tea with lemon. Tea with lemon. I feel like running through the streets today, being like, Broadway is back! Did you know? It's so many shows are reopening today, and you can feel it outside. Yeah. The pulse, yes. I can feel it.
My people!
And Craig and Hal were also feeling the pulse on top of the Hamilton marquee, speaking to Hamilton himself and Eliza, played by Miguel Cervantes and Crystal Joy Brown.
Do you feel the, in a sense, responsibility almost to bring some sense of normalcy to our lives?
Tonight's not about Hamilton. It's about the city. It's about the country. It's about renewing our life and getting back to the new and moving forward.
Crystal, what are you most excited about?
So I'm excited to be with my cast and crew, and I'm also excited to look out into an audience full of people who are there to be inspired.
And The Lion King has been inspiring for decades. Jenna and Carson spoke with two of its stars, Adrian Walker and Brandon McCall, right before curtain.
You feel like Hakuna Matata has a whole new meaning in your life?
Yeah. I think being away from the stage for so long, I learned a lot about myself, and so I do have less worries.
Hakuna Matata, that was my motto for the whole pandemic. Like, no worries, we'll get through this. Everyone being here tonight, everyone stepping foot in that theater, it's just a sign of perseverance. We all made it through together.
Even former stars of the shows came to show support, like the effervescent Kristen Chenoweth, who originated the role of Glinda.
This is my daughter, Vale. This is Miss Chenoweth.
Nice to meet you.
Here we are. It's Broadway. It's opening night. Curtain's about to go up.
I'm actually nervous. It's like I'm back there. The audience, we are so happy to have them, but if they could only feel what's going on with the people on stage, if they could only feel our hearts are beating so fast, this is the way to help our hearts. Arts has the power to change lives.
You're part of healing tonight.
I'm so happy. Who can say if I've been changed for the better? And then and at your ballet class, I have been changed for good.
And then it was the magic moment to reopen the doors to Broadway.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to Wicked!
The theater is open! Welcome to Hamilton!
3, 2, 1! The audience audiences jumping out of their seats before the shows even started.
Welcome back to the theater.
As surprised guests greeted them.
There's no place like home.
And the first notes played. Each show seemed to sing the same refrain. Broadway is back.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.